Hello and welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel. This is Scott, and today we're going to talk about creating an Ubuntu LXD Desktop OS for the Homelab. So often it's helpful to have a desktop instance to do testing or tools installation. We learned in previous videos how LXD is faster and more efficient than a virtual machine because only the operating system is virtual and it has no boot up process. It's basically an instant on type machine. So we're going to learn how to create a LXD instance. Once again, we've done that in past videos. And we're going to add a desktop GUI to that instance. And we're going to enable an RDP server so that it can be accessed from Apache Guacamole, Windows, or some other RDP client. And then we're going to add some basic tools to this configuration. So here we are at the command prompt for the host on which I'm going to create the containers. I'm going to do an IP route show to see my interfaces. And the interface that I'm going to be interested in creating this container on is going to be QVS0. QVS1, I guess. Okay, yeah, we'll do it on QVS1. So I already have a profile out here. If I do a LXC profile list, we can see that I have a profile for my untagged VLAN, which I used on a previous video. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that the way I created that was, first of all, I created a LXC profile create untagged. And once I created that untagged VLAN, then all I did was establish it as a macvlan definition here with LXC profile device add untagged ETH0 because that's what's used inside a container. nictype equals macvlan parent equals QVS1. Your interface is going to differ. All right. So since I've gotten to that particular point, I'll show you that my untagged VLAN exists by doing LXC profile show untagged. You can see it above, and there's how it looks after having done those commands. So I'm going to do a launch an Ubuntu container here, Ubuntu 2004. And I'm going to use those profiles untagged and default to do that. And it's creating the desktop. It's retrieving the image. And there it's created. So the next thing I'm going to do is a LXC exec desktop, because that's the name of the image I created, and then Bosh, which is the command shell I want. And there we are signed into the Ubuntu instance. I can do an LSB underbar release -A. You can see that it's Ubuntu 2004. I can do a uname -R, and you can see that it's running the 5.10.60 kernel, and you can also see that I created this on my QNAP NAS. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a sudo apt install taskcell. Taskcell is a program that allows you to add various desktops. Now that taskcell is installed, I'm going to say sudo taskcell install Ubuntu desktop. And this will initiate the install of the Ubuntu desktop. This is going to take quite some time. Now that the desktop installation has completed, we want to go ahead and add a user. So I say add user, Scott. So all along here, I haven't really needed to do the sudo command because we're already within a shell being connected to LXD, but force of habit. Okay, so we've created a new user account here, and I'm going to say usermod -a capital G sudo Scott, adding Scott to the sudo group. Okay, then I'm going to su over to Scott. Now we're logged into desktop as Scott, and we are going to get the script that I've featured before in some of my other videos that adds an RDP installer into the Ubuntu configuration. So I am going to unzip that installer. It simply inflates a simple script, and the script we will execute. It asks for my sudo password, and it goes off and installs the RDP server on the machine. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and install NetTools. And we do an if config to determine our IP address. And on my local network, you can see here that my IP address is 172.16.1.218. So here I am at the Guacamole GUI, and I'm going to go ahead and connect to my desktop. You, of course, could use a Windows RDP client or any other RDP client that you might like. So in previous videos, I've discussed the Guacamole client, and I like it pretty well. So anyway, here's our desktop, and this is what it looks like. As in any new Ubuntu installation, we're presented with setting up live patch, which I could do, but I'm not going to do this time. I'm just going to go ahead and do a next, and then I will send information to Canonical. Why not? And I'll go ahead and turn privacy services on. So your settings may vary depending upon your level of privacy requirements. So I'll do a done, and there we are. So it says that this computer needs to restart to finish installing updates. So I'll go ahead and say restart now. Type in my sudo password. Guacamole wants to send me back home. So we're going to wait a couple of seconds for that reboot to complete. One of the first things I like to do on a new desktop is to install the Gnome shell extensions. So I'm going to go up here and start a terminal. And I am going to do a sudo apt install Gnome -shell -extensions. Next, we're going to go into Firefox, and we're going to go ahead and say Gnome shell extensions. We go to extensions.gnome.org, and it says click here to install the browser extension. I click there. I say continue to installation and add. So now I have the shell extension. you're going to want to log off and log back in again to get the Gnome shell extensions to be able to work. Then I want to come up here and run tweak. And under tweak, if you go to extensions, you should now have a pretty good long list. Like we can add an applications menu, we can add desktop icons, which gives you the ability to manipulate which desktop icons are in there. For example, personal folder on the desktop, trash can on the desktop type thing. I just think it's amazing how you can run a full-up desktop with the GUI in LXD, and it runs so well. In any event, one of my other pet peeves in terms of usability with Ubuntu has always been the Natilus file manager. So you can bring up the Natilus file manager and you can do something like, say, I want to list these things tabularly. And then we go ahead and we bring up another window, and this window we want to go to, say, downloads. Now we don't have anything in downloads. Let's go to home and other locations. There we go. Since this is a new installation, we don't have any great places to go to, so we'll have to look around. So I go to computer and I go to bin. And now what I want to do is, let's say I want to display bin in terms of icons. So now what I do is I close both these windows and I bring Natilus back up. And there we go. We've got icons over here. And if we go up to other locations, we go to computer and we go back to bin, we've got icons there. In other words, it doesn't remember the screen geometry, it doesn't remember the screen location, it doesn't remember things like whether or not I wanted to display icons or tabular names like this, and that's really bothersome. So one of the things I like to do is install another file manager called Nemo. And Nemo is actually very nice. Go ahead and bring up a terminal. And we're going to go ahead and purge the Natilus installation for the desktop icons. One of the first things you want to do. And then I'm going to install Nemo. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this command to set some of the MIME settings. And then we have two G settings commands we want to do. This one and this one. So we'll go off and list these in the notes at the end, obviously. And the final thing we want to do is we want to edit the desktop startup procedure for Gnome Desktop, or for Nemo Desktop rather. So we put that in there and we save this out. And then what I want to do is I want to log off. And log back in. So we're going to bring up Nemo. And we'll go ahead and add to favorites. And I'm going to put him down here where Natilus was. All right, so let's launch Nemo. Nemo comes up, and there we have a desktop, documents folder, and so on. So let's go into Documents, and let's create a new document. And let's suppose we didn't want to display our documents as icons, but we want to display them tabularly, so we go ahead and we do that. We go ahead and create another document, empty document 2, empty document 3. Okay, so, and likewise, in Pictures, we go ahead and create a document, and we create another document, and we create another document. Now in Pictures, I want them to display as icons the way they are now, but when I go into Home, I want icons, but when I go to Documents, I want it tabularly. And you notice that it remembers all of these settings for each individual particular screen, and that's really handy. Plus, it has a lot of other interesting options as well. So another thing I like about Natilus is the fact that you can display as a location, and you can also display as the icons up here. So you can have a choice of how you address things. This becomes handy when you want to do things like connect to a network drive easily, that sort of thing. And then, of course, it divides your devices and your network and your shortcuts up much more nicely. Obviously, there's a lot more you can do in terms of customization of your desktop, but I wanted to make this video because I wanted to give folks an idea of the fact that you could create in an LXD container a desktop that you can use for testing in your environment. And it's the LXD is very lightweight, very efficient, and very fast. And it doesn't go through any boot time. So what we did was we created an Ubuntu 2004 LTS LXD container on the untagged VLAN. We installed the Ubuntu Desktop on the container. We added a username to the container and granted it sudo privilege. We installed an RDP server to access the desktop from Apache Guacamole, which I cover in some of my previous videos, or Windows. And then we installed Gnome extension support and some extensions to support viewing our IP address on the top panel, which can be handy, especially if you're connecting to another container. And then we replaced the Natilus file manager with the Nemo file manager and demonstrated some of the functionality that Nemo has that exceeds what we have with Natilus. And then the end result is a lightweight Ubuntu desktop instance that can be modified to fit our requirements. So anyway, that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening, and please subscribe and like to the channel. We'll see you next time.